Hello and welcome to our program Violence Free World. My name is Cally Ikpe, and today we continue our discourse on how to get our country violence free. And my guest on the program today is a veteran broadcaster, veteran journalist, and activist, if you like, and CEO of Radio Now 95.3 FM in Lagos, Kadaria Ahmed, where we'll be discussing several issues, but chief amongst them is the issue of politics of terrorism and the involvement of journalists. Now, Kadaria, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Cally, for having me.
All right, now we're going to come right back into the conversation, but after this special report, please be here. Nigeria's journey through nationhood, like many others, have been characterized with good and bad incidents. A peep at our trajectory points at the 1966 coup as the most dramatic incident, a callous adventure that led to the Civil War of 1967. Where millions of lives were lost and properties worth billions destroyed. While efforts at genuine reconciliation have continued, terror merchants with motives that are political, religious and monetary have for a considerable while continued to visit men on the citizens. The hallmarks of the present terror regime are the insurgency in the northeast of Nigeria, the banditry in northwest, herdsmen crisis in the north central and southwest Nigeria, and most recently, the southeast is beginning to experience what looks like the Borno-based insurgency in its nascency. Violence, therefore, has become a common denominator from all and across Nigeria. Fear is palpable as the military continue in their efforts at combating the enemies. Many citizens are beginning to wonder if the situation is now hopeless. Gladly, the reality in certain parts of Nigeria elicits hope. Many analysts will readily cite the calm in the Niger Delta region after a near total war and a reversal in status of parts of Kogi State as an enclave of Boko Haram are all pointers to the fact that the reign of terror is surmountable. Finally, as we hope for an end to terror and a return to normalcy, a positive redefinition of mindsets amongst Nigerians is most necessary. Welcome back, Kadaria. Now let's go straight into the conversation.
Okay.
Our country, Nigeria, has been more like on the precipice, and now we are ranked amongst some very serious countries in terms of violence. I'm referring to the likes of Afghanistan, Iraq, and several others. In fact, we are ranked number 3 on the Global Terrorism Index. How does that make you feel as a citizen of the Federal Republic of Nigeria?
Worried, very concerned, because obviously if you care about this country and you see what's happening to it, there is no way you'll be sleeping peacefully in your bed. But you know, we didn't arrive here, Cally, by accident. We got here through the choices that we've made over the years. Choices driven mostly by bad governance, by people in positions of authority who have continue to actually see political office not as something that you do to serve, but for something that advances your own personal career, your own personal goals, etc., etc. Nigeria has not been blessed with a strong, morally upright political class, unfortunately. It has deteriorated. It didn't happen overnight, but we essentially, normal, regular folks have ceded this space to people or to politicians whose only reason for being in office is either to make money or to advance their own personal careers. And the result of that over many years is where we are today. Of course, you can't take, the background of this is that you can't take this away from the fact of the role of the military and how in the end, when we were returning back to civilian rule, because of what the military had done, many people didn't think it was for real. And so serious Nigerians that had things to offer, Nigerians that had careers in other places, that because they have the experience of either working in private sector might have contributed a lot to public office, didn't think the military were serious about handing over, and so did not really jump into politics the way they should. And the result, of course, is that you end up with a place that is extremely, we're in a place where you have very intelligent people. Everybody admits that Nigerians are intelligent, we're smart, we go to other parts of the world and we excel. But somehow in our own country, the worst among us are the people we put in charge. So there's a reason that this country is where it is. It's not an accident. If you look at the data, if you look at what is going on, you will see a direct correlation between misgovernance, bad governance, and where we are.
Until a man has been tested with power, that's when you can know his true nature. So maybe that's a part of departure between you and I as far as having the best of presidents in the...
But you see, I think when Nigerians talk about leadership, we always think of leadership in terms of maybe the presidency and all of that. But there are different levels of leadership in the country. Starting from, if you talk about political leadership, from the presidency, sort of down to governors, down to local government chairmen, down to commissioners.
I meant exactly that.
I will share some statistics for you, you, and then you tell me why we are surprised.
Before we get to that,
okay.
Before we get to that, now,
Right.
While you were saying all of that, you hinted at the motives, secret motives for people being in governance, and that brings me to this issue of corporate conspiracy. That's what in other words, this is, you see, official complicity in the adversity that we face today. People who ordinarily we should be running to for solutions becoming complicit in all of what is going on for either political or financial gains.
Yes.
That's why the spate of violence in Nigeria had continued to linger. My opinion, based on the discussions that I've had with persons.
And you're right, Cally.
Yes.
Look, just last week, the CDD, the Center for Democracy and Development, issued a report in which they said $15 billion has been misappropriated by in the purchase of arms.
Yes.
In the last 20 years through the connivance of military or people in security, working in security, and politicians who are in charge. Now, they have essentially, according to that report, commercialized and monetized this conflict. It takes a certain kind of person for you to wake up every day to stories of people kidnapped, people killed, soldiers, losing their lives, young boys who sort of decided Nigeria is worth fighting and dying for, who are on the front lines. And your idea of how to do your job is to steal. It takes a certain kind of wickedness, in my view. It takes a certain kind of heartlessness and a certain kind of selfishness to be able to sleep with a clear conscience when you've been put in charge of sorting out what is essentially an existential crisis facing Nigeria, and your first instinct is that you want to make a little bit of money from it. But how did we get here? We didn't get here accidentally. We've seen the collapse of the rule of law, which means impunity is reigning supreme. People commit crimes, get away with it. or when they are punished, the punishment is not at par with the crime they've committed. So they're happy to take the punishment because the gains outweigh the punishment. And so there's been a total collapse of our institutions across board. You know, the judiciary is failing, lawyers are failing, politicians are failing. And as a result, what you now have is society that has lost its moral compass. And so if we don't go back to basics, I'm afraid this is not a conversation that we will see the back of. So these are things that will continue to give us problem. And what are the basics? If you look at the countries that, or the regions of the country that have the biggest problems, these are the regions where people don't go to school. So in a place like Yobe, for example, 80% of men have never been into any sort of formal education. In Borno, is slightly better, it's 60%. So imagine what the statistics is for women in that region. In my state, Zamfara, where we've seen the recent rise of these so-called bandits, I call them terrorists, between, the numbers vary depending on who you talk to, but we have an illiteracy rate of between 90 to 97%. How are you going to build a community in a place where people can't read, people can't write, and therefore they're not equipped to operate in a modern society? They have no skills. And so it's not like we're even doing like informal, you know, skills and everything. They don't do no vocational training, nothing. Why do we think that it is possible for such a society to be functional? It isn't. And then, in addition to that, cultural practices that are out of this world, that when you talk, people abuse you and say, oh, you are too modern, you are too English, whatever. One man will marry 4 wives, most of them from the age of like 12. So this is basically generational poverty you're sowing. He is not that educated. The job he's doing isn't that great. The wives are children, trying to raise children. Each wife will have an average 7 children. You get a man with between 35 to 40 children, whose job might be mending shoes.
So who caters to the children?
Exactly. And our educational system is more or less non-existent. So how are you going to ensure that those kids are looked after? Look, 12, 13 years ago, we had about 4 million out-of-school children between Northwest and the Northeast. These are the children who are now young adults and are therefore vulnerable and susceptible to crime and to insurgency, to being, you know, led by ideologies, because they can't think. The other thing, I don't know if you heard a few years ago, maybe 2 years ago, Bill Gates was talking about the impact of malnutrition on children. So if children are not fed properly between the ages of 0 and 5, their cognitive development is impaired. What that means is that you essentially grow a whole generation who, because their cognitive abilities have been impaired, cannot really reason, cannot think, and therefore can be led like sheep. Today, as we talk, we have 13 million of those children roaming Nigeria, but mostly to be found in the northern part of Nigeria. And our governors are sleeping. I mean, nobody is treating this like the emergency that it is. What do you think is going to happen to those young 13 million children when they get to young adulthood, where people begin to have aspirations for their life? You know, we live in an information world. So unfortunately, or say fortunately for us, depending on who you're talking to, they can see how other people live. And so they now have aspirations, but you've not equipped them. You've not educated them, you've not given them skills, you've not given them an education. What do you think is going to happen with those 13 million young boys? How
does that figure relate to the Amajiri scourge?
But that's what it is. That's who they are. And by the time they are on the streets, don't forget, it's not as if they lead a normal childhood on those streets. By the time they're on the streets, they're hardened, because many of them are victims of abuse, both sexual, physical. They go to bed hungry, they wake up hungry, they are cold. So, you know, by the time they get to a stage where they can begin to think about what to do about their lives, they are looking around at society and they are not connected emotionally to that society in any way. They owe the society nothing because the society has not done anything for them. And so there's no obligation. They don't feel obliged in any way to be either good citizens or they will do what they think is good for them. Now, that group of people, millions of them, in the hands of a terrorist and, a demagogue who has an ideology, who convinces them that I'm the answer because, everything else has failed, they become a weapon.
Well, Kadaria, I think we need to now speak to the participation of the media, the involvement of the media in all of this. But that will be when we return from this break. This is Violence Free World. I'm speaking with my guest, Kadaria Ahmed, and we'll be right back after this time out. Be here. Welcome back, Kadaria. Now
Cally.
Let's go.
You like calling my name, Cally?
Yes. No. Really. Again, you have pointed to the fact that, or to the thinking in some quarters that this profits some people, that it is like that, some elites, for the situation to continue to be that way. Which brings me now to the politics of terrorism, which in a way connects the media. I'm coming back to the media directly first. Politics of terrorism. Who does it hurt that these people, these bandits, are labeled or branded terrorists?
I don't know who it hurts, but I know that in the past there's been conversations around the fact that politicians use thugs, use these bandits, for campaigning, and a lot of them actually, there seems to be a historical connection between them and some politicians in the north. When you talk about Boko Haram, for example, there's a former governor that has had fingers pointed at him as one of the early people who sort of, basically used them for political campaigning and all that. But look, even if that was the case then, my argument is now it has reached a question where it's threatening everybody's survival. So what you would expect is that it will bring everybody's mind to focus on how to resolve it. Because we've reached a stage now where I think there was a time our political class thought they could build bubbles. We all thought we could build bubbles because I can't exempt myself. Unfortunately, I find myself as part of that. I'm not a politician, but I'm part of what they call the elite. And I think we thought we could build bubbles around ourselves, sit down in our GRAs and our highbrow areas, send our children abroad, go to private clinics, and somehow exclude ourselves from the dysfunction of Nigeria. Even if you used to think like that before, I think the reality of the last few years should have brought it home to you that actually it is not that simple or that straightforward, that you can't live in a bubble. And so it makes a lot of sense for you to start tackling these issues because they're coming right home to you. So everybody now has been a victim, including politicians. So this is why I don't understand why I'm not seeing the urgency that is required. I hate to think they're too daft to understand what is going on. I don't think they're that daft. So if you're not daft, and you see what's happening in Zamfara, you see what's happening in Niger State, you see what's happening in Sokoto, right? And even more recently, we're hearing of kidnappings on the Lagos-Ibadan road.
Yes,
you understand? Yes. And even on the road to Benin, between Ore and Benin. So what makes you think you can isolate? You can't. And the answer does not lie in stealing enough money to go and live with your family abroad, because that's not a life.
All right, Kadaria, I think that's well said. But the other part of the question, which you didn't allow me to land with, is why did it take the federal government this long to brand these people terrorists, to brand bandits terrorists? I was asking that, who does it benefit that it is that they're looked at as common criminals? We're talking about who it profits that it is this way.
You're trying to turn me into a federal government spokesman. That's,
No, not necessarily.
You're asking me why I can't speak for government.
No, why do you think it took?
I don't know, but I imagine that there's a process because branding.
Okay, it's a procedural issue.
I don't know. Like. You are asking me to speak to things that I don't know anything about.
Okay.
But if I could, take a guess, I imagine that even in the United States or some of the longest living democracies, you don't just wake up one day and say somebody is a terrorist. I think there's a process. That's a guess. Based on what I see happen in other countries, designating a group or people as terrorists, I think is a serious matter because it has serious repercussions and allows governments to also deal with certain issues in a certain way, which include freezing of accounts and that sort of thing. We've seen it internationally.
Yes.
And I think it's a process, that there's a procedure for it. You don't just wake up one day and say, okay, they're terrorists. And, I think you have to go through some, technicalities, including maybe even going before.
Even legal.
I think so.
Yes.
So I imagine that's why. But I wouldn't know. All I would know would be based on is just sort of the insight I get as a journalist reporting on these things regularly. I have no, information that's different from everybody else.
Okay.
So that would be my guess.
Yes.
But on the issue of why it matters, I'm happy it's been done because I think what it does is that it allows governments to deploy certain resources towards fighting them, but also more importantly, I think they can then get international help as well because the fight against terrorism is a global fight, and I think under sort of existing conventions, once a group have been declared as terrorists, then you can lean on your diplomatic friends, your countries that you have a relationship with, where you have arrangements with, to sort of help you in that fight. So I think that's why it was done. It was to enable the ability to deal with them a little bit more decisively.
Well, Kadaria, I think the issue we penciled down at quite legion, and the time for myself and even for you, it's not practicable for us to exhaust all of it now.
Yes,
but we need to agree that we have to come back and continue.
Okay, when you're ready, Cally.
No, okay, so that's the promise. Kadaria is going to come back.
Yes.
We're going to come back here and continue this conversation.
Yes.
But before I just let you go, radio now is part of your solution, that you're walking the talk.
Yes.
And do something.
And it's not easy.
1 minute or
Yes.
30 seconds, tell me, what's Radio Talk doing as far as catering to what we're doing?
So essentially we think Nigeria has a depth of context and analysis. We think that part of the reason we get into trouble is that, there's no historical understanding of what is going on and people have short memories. So we don't try to sort of focus on breaking news. We report it if we can verify it, but by and large, we think our job is to tell people what has happened, why it has happened, how it affects them, and what they can do to get involved if they choose to. Those are the things that we're trying to do.
On radio now.
95.3 FM Lagos. And you can hear us, yes, but you can hear us streaming. Our website is www.thisisradionow.com. And we're also on Radio Garden.
Kadaria, I must commend you and congratulate you for that.
Thank you.
You're a very wonderful person. It's been a very exciting session.
Thank you. And now, by the way, our election programs have also started. So we have a few town halls between legislators and National Assembly members as a way of deepening an understanding of the way the National Assembly works. First one is Saturday in Ibadan. They are regional. And we're doing this in collaboration with Channels TV, so it will also be on television.
Very well, Kadaria. Thank you very much for obliging me. Well, like you promised, we're coming back to have this conversation very, very, very soon.
Thank you.
Well, I've been speaking with veteran broadcaster, veteran journalist, Kadaria Ahmed, an activist too, if you like. My name is Cally Ikpe. Same time next week promises much more if you endeavor to be here. But until then, please remember, like we always say, to remain on the road to a violence-free Nigeria. Thank you again for watching.
No.